and the identity is rather shocking.
They're getting some breaking news in the investigation into the disappearance of Nancy Guthrie.
Search for Nancy Guthrie.
Theories that her sister Annie Guthrie, brother-in-law Tommaso Cioni, or brother Cameron Guthrie had been involved.
They threatened to kill Nancy Guthrie. We had not heard that until now. We always knew that there was a consequence threatened if you don't pay by Thursday. Then by Monday, there's a second deadline, and the consequence is that the money goes up, I think, to $6 million. But we never heard that the other consequence was that they threatened to kill Nancy Guthrie.
News Nation exclusive on the search for Nancy Guthrie. It's been over 2 months since she went missing, and despite all the national attention, we still have no idea what happened to her or where she might be.
The press conferences started happening and the interviews with Nanos. What were you thinking?
That they actually do have a potential suspect in the case, and the identity is rather shocking.
They're getting some breaking news in the investigation into the disappearance of Nancy Guthrie.
Search for Nancy Guthrie.
Theories that her sister Annie Guthrie, brother-in-law Tommaso Cioni, or brother Cameron Guthrie had been involved.
They threatened to kill Nancy Guthrie. We had not heard that until now. We always knew that there was a consequence threatened if you don't pay by Thursday. Then by Monday, there's a second deadline, and the consequence is that the money goes up, I think, to $6 million. But we never heard that the other consequence was that they threatened to kill Nancy Guthrie.
News Nation exclusive on the search for Nancy Guthrie. It's been over 2 months since she went missing, and despite all the national attention, we still have no idea what happened to her or where she might be.
The press conferences started happening and the interviews with Nanos. What were you thinking?
Shut your mouth. Stop talking. That's pretty much what we were all saying. Is why is he out there saying?
Listen carefully, because what investigators just pulled out of Nancy Guthrie's pacemaker was never meant to become public. Not a rumor, not a theory, actual data. And according to insiders connected to the Federal Bureau of Investigation, those final recorded moments didn't just track an woman's heartbeat, captured the exact second something went terribly wrong. Now think about this. How does an 84-year-old woman living in a quiet neighborhood suddenly vanish without a single scream, without a forced door, without neighbors hearing anything? No struggle, no chaos, just silence. But here's where the news takes a turn that even investigators reportedly didn't expect. Because when analysts finally decoded the device inside Nancy's chest, the timeline they discovered didn't match the official narrative that's been circulating for weeks. Not close. Instead of a slow medical emergency, the pacemaker recorded one violent spike, followed by something experts are calling medically abnormal. A moment so sudden, so precise, it suggests that whatever happened inside that house happened fast. Too fast for panic. Too fast for resistance. Which raises a chilling question. Did Nancy disappear that night? Or did someone inside that house make sure she never had the chance to react? And if the data is telling the truth, then those final minutes weren't random. They were planned. And what investigators are uncovering next might expose a news far darker than anyone imagined. The quiet community of Catalina Foothills had always been the kind of place where nothing dramatic ever happened. The streets were calm. The houses were spaced far enough apart to feel private, but close enough that neighbors still waved to each other in the morning. People walked their dogs at sunrise, collected their mail in the evening, and went to sleep believing their neighborhood was the definition of safe. And for decades, that peaceful routine included one very familiar face. Nancy Guthrie, an 84-year-old woman known by nearly everyone on the block. She wasn't a celebrity. She wasn't a controversial public figure. She wasn't someone anyone expected to appear in headlines. But that's exactly what made what happened next so disturbing. Because Nancy was the type of person whose life ran on routine. Every morning she watered the small garden in front of her home. Every afternoon she spoke briefly with neighbors walking past. And every weekend she spent time with family, playing cards, sharing stories, and repeating the same jokes everyone had heard 100 times before. Predictable, calm, ordinary, until suddenly none of it was. The night everything changed didn't start with alarms or chaos. In fact, according to early reports, the evening seemed almost boringly normal. Nancy had reportedly spent time with family earlier that night. Nothing unusual. No signs of distress. No strange phone calls. No warnings that something was about to go wrong. When she returned home, everything looked exactly the way it always did.
Lights on, doors closed.
The quiet comfort of a routine evening. But sometime after midnight, something inside that house shifted. And no one noticed. Not neighbors. Not passing cars. Not even the security system mounted outside the property. Hours later, when family members tried to reach her and got no response, concern slowly started building. At first, it didn't feel like an emergency. After all, Nancy was elderly. Maybe she had fallen asleep early. Maybe she simply hadn't heard the phone. But as the hours passed, that calm explanation began to collapse. Because when someone finally checked the house, they didn't find Nancy resting. They didn't find her watching television. They didn't find her anywhere. She was simply gone. At first, investigators treated the situation like a standard missing person case. Local authorities reviewed the property, spoke with neighbors, and considered the most common possibilities. Maybe she wandered off. Maybe she experienced a medical emergency outside. Maybe she had been confused or disoriented. But that theory lasted about 5 minutes. Because the moment investigators stepped inside the home, something immediately felt wrong. The house wasn't chaotic. There were no overturned tables or shattered windows. Nothing that screamed violent struggle. But subtle details told a different news. Items slightly out of place. Movement patterns that didn't match a normal evening. And then something else. A small amount of blood. Not enough to create panic immediately, but enough to change the entire direction of the investigation. Suddenly, this wasn't about a confused elderly woman wandering into the night. Now investigators had to consider a much darker possibility. Someone had been inside that house. And whatever happened there didn't happen voluntarily. That's the moment the case escalated beyond a local investigation. Within days, federal authorities from the Federal Bureau of Investigation quietly stepped in. And when that happens, it usually means one thing. The situation is bigger than it first appeared. Behind the scenes, investigators began piecing together Nancy's final known movements. Surveillance cameras from nearby homes were reviewed. Phone activity was analyzed. Digital records were pulled. At first, the results seemed frustratingly ordinary. No obvious suspect. No suspicious vehicles. No loud disturbances captured by neighborhood cameras. It was almost as if the person responsible had slipped in and out without leaving any clear trace. But then investigators discovered something that changed everything. A pattern. Footage from cameras placed around nearby streets began revealing a figure appearing repeatedly near Nancy's home in the weeks before she vanished. Not once, not twice, multiple times. Always at a distance. Always just long enough to pass through the frame. At first glance, the individual looked like any other passerby. Someone walking through the neighborhood. Someone who didn't belong but also didn't stand out enough to cause concern. But when investigators mapped the appearances, something unsettling became clear. The sightings weren't random. They followed a schedule. Most of the appearances occurred on weekends. Late evenings. Quiet hours. Moments when neighbors were less likely to notice someone lingering nearby. It started to look less like coincidence and more like surveillance. Someone watching. Someone learning. Someone studying Nancy's routine. And that realization opened a much darker possibility. What if the disappearance wasn't spontaneous? What if someone had been preparing for it? While investigators examined physical evidence, another disturbing detail quietly surfaced through people close to Nancy. In the weeks leading up to the incident, she had reportedly mentioned something strange happening online. Nothing dramatic at the time, just small digital alerts. Login notifications she didn't recognize. Activity on accounts she hadn't touched. Friends assumed it was the usual tech confusion many older people experience. Maybe she clicked the wrong email. Maybe a password reset triggered a notification. But investigators looking back at those events started wondering something else. What if those alerts weren't random glitches? What if someone had already begun accessing parts of Nancy's life digitally? Learning schedules, studying habits, understanding exactly when she would be alone. If that theory is true, then the night Nancy vanished may not have been the beginning of the crime. It may have been the final step in a plan that had been forming for weeks. And that possibility is exactly what made investigators revisit one silent witness inside the house that had been overlooked at first. The device implanted in Nancy's chest. Her pacemaker. At first, it was treated as nothing more than medical background information. But when analysts from the Federal Bureau of Investigation finally performed a forensic extraction of the device's stored data, they realized it contained something extraordinary. A precise biological timeline. Every heartbeat, every irregular rhythm, every moment of stress, including the final moments before Nancy disappeared. And when analysts began examining those records, they didn't just see medical readings. They saw a sequence, a pattern that didn't look natural, a sudden spike, a reaction, and then something that would soon force investigators to ask a terrifying question. What if Nancy Guthrie didn't slowly realize she was in danger? What if she only understood what was happening at the very last second? Because the deeper investigators looked into those final recorded moments, the clearer one disturbing idea became. Whoever was inside that house that night didn't just act quickly. They acted with precision. And if the data was correct, then the most frightening part of the entire mystery wasn't how Nancy disappeared. It was the possibility that the person responsible had already been inside the house, waiting long before anyone realized something was wrong. The deeper investigators examined the biological timeline recorded inside the pacemaker, the more the case began to shift from a confusing disappearance to something far more unsettling. Because what the device revealed didn't look like the chaotic pattern experts normally see when someone is frightened or struggling. Instead, the sequence was almost surgical. The data extracted from the pacemaker of Nancy Guthrie showed a moment that analysts now describe as the trigger point. At first, everything looked stable. Her heart rhythm appeared normal for an 84-year-old woman living quietly in her home in Catalina foothills. Nothing unusual. No signs of stress. No sudden panic. But then, within seconds, the pattern changed. Not gradually. Instantly. A sharp spike appeared in the data logs. According to sources familiar with the analysis conducted by the Federal Bureau of Investigation, the reaction resembled what medical experts call a sudden shock response. But what happened next was even more unusual, because instead of continuing to fluctuate like a heart under extreme fear normally would, the signal stabilized briefly. And then, silence. No prolonged panic. No chaotic struggle. No desperate fight for survival.
Just a spike.
A brief moment of abnormal stabilization, and then the signal stopped. When investigators first saw that pattern, several of them reportedly assumed the data had been corrupted. Devices malfunction sometimes. Electronic readings can be misinterpreted. But after multiple reviews, analysts reached the same unsettling conclusion. The pacemaker was functioning perfectly, which meant the sequence it recorded was real. And that raised a question that instantly changed the direction of the investigation. What kind of situation causes a sudden shock response, followed almost immediately by a controlled shutdown? Because experts reviewing the pattern behind closed doors reportedly described it using one word: immediate. The type of reaction that occurs when something happens so quickly that the body barely has time to process it. Imagine standing alone in your home late at night. Everything quiet, everything normal. And then suddenly realizing someone else is in the room. Not outside. Not breaking in. Already inside. That moment of realization can trigger a sharp biological spike. A sudden shock. Exactly the kind of spike Nancy's pacemaker recorded. But the lack of prolonged panic suggested something else. Something faster. Something controlled. And that's when investigators decided to compare the pacemaker data with another piece of evidence collected earlier in the case. The security camera mounted outside Nancy's home. For weeks, the footage from that camera had been treated as a simple technical failure. At approximately 2:28 a.m., the camera feed suddenly went offline. At first, it seemed like a coincidence. Equipment fails all the time. But when digital analysts aligned the camera outage with the pacemaker timeline, something disturbing appeared. The heart spike occurred before the camera went dark. Not after. Before. which means Nancy reacted to something happening inside her house seconds before the surveillance system was disabled. Think about that for a moment. If the camera was disabled by an intruder entering the property, the spike should appear afterward. But that's not what the timeline shows. According to the data, Nancy's body reacted first. The camera shut down seconds later, and that detail created a possibility investigators hadn't seriously considered before. The person responsible may have already been inside the house, waiting, hidden, positioned somewhere inside the property before Nancy even realized she wasn't alone. If that theory is correct, then this wasn't a random break-in. It wasn't someone sneaking through a window. It was someone who either had access to the house or someone Nancy allowed inside. And just as investigators were trying to process that possibility, another strange discovery surfaced from the digital evidence collected in the home. Because at the exact moment Nancy's pacemaker recorded that sudden spike, the home Wi-Fi network logged something unexpected. A device connection. Not earlier that evening. Not hours before. The connection appeared at the exact second the spike occurred. A brand new device joining the network. And here's the part that immediately raised alarm among investigators. The device had never connected to that network before. It didn't belong to Nancy. It didn't belong to family members. And it wasn't associated with any known smart devices inside the home. It appeared for a short time and then vanished. No repeated connections. No stored device name. No obvious identity. Just a digital fingerprint showing that something had briefly entered the network range and then disappeared. Cyber forensic teams working alongside the Federal Bureau of Investigation began analyzing the signal logs, attempting to trace the device's unique connection signature. They checked nearby towers, reviewed surrounding network traffic, compared the timestamp with other signals recorded in the area, but the results have never been publicly disclosed. And that silence has only intensified speculation surrounding the case. Because when investigators line up the sequence of events, the timeline looks disturbingly precise. Nancy reacts suddenly. A new device connects to her Wi-Fi. Seconds later, the security camera goes offline. And within 41 minutes, the pacemaker records its final signal. No chaos. No screaming neighbors. No obvious signs of struggle. Just a clean, controlled sequence. The kind of sequence that makes investigators start wondering whether this was carried out by someone who knew exactly what they were doing, and possibly someone who wasn't working alone. Online, the case has exploded into a storm of theories. Social media threads analyzing the timeline have gathered millions of views. Amateur investigators are mapping out the digital clues, arguing over whether the Wi-Fi connection proves someone brought a device into the house intentionally.
Some believe it was a phone.
Others suggest it could have been a portable signal jammer or monitoring device. One viral post that spread rapidly across true crime communities asked a chilling question. What if the device wasn't just there to connect? What if it was there to watch? The theory suggests that whoever entered the house may have been tracking Nancy's movements in real time, monitoring when she was awake, monitoring when she moved, waiting for the exact moment to act. And whether that theory is accurate or not, one fact remains clear. The timeline investigators have reconstructed doesn't look random. It looks coordinated. And that realization is exactly why the investigation quietly began shifting toward a new line of questioning. Not just how someone entered the house, but who could enter without causing immediate alarm. Because remember, Nancy's pacemaker didn't record long periods of fear. It recorded a sudden shock. The type of reaction someone might have when they unexpectedly recognize a familiar face standing somewhere they shouldn't be. Which means the most disturbing possibility of all is now being considered. What if the person responsible wasn't a stranger? What if it was someone Nancy had seen before? Someone she trusted. Someone who could stand inside that house without triggering instant panic. Because if that theory is correct, then the mystery surrounding those final 41 minutes isn't just about a disappearance. It's about something far more personal. And investigators may already be looking directly at someone who was once considered completely harmless. Someone had access. Someone who had been questioned. And someone who walked away the first time without raising suspicion. But if the evidence continues pointing in that direction, then the quiet neighborhood of Catalina Foothills may soon learn that the truth behind Nancy Guthrie's final night is darker than anyone imagined. And the person responsible may be far closer to home than anyone wants to believe. As investigators continued digging deeper into the timeline surrounding the disappearance of Nancy Guthrie, the atmosphere inside the investigation reportedly shifted from confusion to something closer to quiet alarm. Because the more pieces they lined up, the less the situation looked like a crime. Instead, it began to resemble something structured, something deliberate, something that may have been unfolding long before that final night in Catalina Foothills. Another detail surfaced. A detail that insiders say investigators didn't initially recognize as important. At first, it looked insignificant. Just another piece of routine forensic processing from inside Nancy's home. But when analysts revisited the evidence collected during the earliest searches of the house, they reportedly noticed something unusual. A partial fingerprint. Not on the front door. Not on the exterior camera. Not on any obvious entry point. Instead, the print was discovered inside the home, on an object located near the area where investigators believe Nancy's final movements occurred. That alone was enough to raise eyebrows. But the real shock came when forensic technicians ran the print through national databases. It didn't match any known criminal record, no prior arrests, no existing fingerprint, which at first was frustrating. But then investigators did something else. They compared the print against individuals who had already been interviewed during the early stages of the case. That's when things reportedly became very uncomfortable. Because according to sources familiar with the review process, print showed similarities to someone who had already been questioned and cleared. Let that sink in for a moment. Someone who had signed the investigation. Someone who had spoken to investigators. Someone who walked away without suspicion. Now something reconsidered. If that condition proves, it changes the entire narrative surrounding Nancy's disappearance. Because it would mean the person responsible wasn't someone through the neighborhood. It would mean the person had a reason to be inside the house. A reason Nancy might immediately panic. A reason she might scream. And that theory lines up with investigators ignore Pacemaker timeline. The device implanted in Nancy's chest to record prolonged fear. It recorded a moment of sudden realization. A sharp spike, then silence. The type of biological reaction experts sometimes associate with shock rather than sustained panic. Imagine opening a door expecting to see a neighbor, and instead seeing someone you recognize, but never expected to appear in your home at that hour. That moment of confusion. That moment of realization. That exact kind of reaction is what the pacemaker appears to have captured. Which is why investigators have reportedly begun re-examining everyone who had legitimate reasons to access Nancy's property. Maintenance workers, service technicians, delivery personnel, even people who had visited the house socially. Anyone who might have known the layout, and who might have understood the routine. Anyone who might have known exactly where security cameras were placed and how long they could move inside the property before being noticed. Because when you combine all the evidence together, the pattern becomes hard to ignore. Someone may have been watching Nancy for weeks. Someone may have studied her schedule. Someone may have understood exactly when she was alone, and someone may have chosen the exact moment when the neighborhood was quiet enough to act. Meanwhile, the internet has turned the case into a full-blown storm of speculation. Online forums dedicated to analyzing the disappearance have exploded with theories. Some users claim the pacemaker data proves this was a highly organized crime. Others insist the mysterious Wi-Fi recorded at the same moment Nancy's heart spiked must belong to the suspect. Screenshots of supposed leaked reports have been shared thousands of times. Anonymous accounts claiming to have insider knowledge are posting cryptic hints about what investigators may already know. One message that circulated widely across social media read, "Everyone keeps asking how someone got inside. But the real question is, why didn't she react sooner?" That sentence has been reposted millions of times. Because it suggests something that many people find difficult to accept. Familiarity, trust, or At least the sense of fear and ability had enormous pressure on investigators from the federal investigation. Public wants answers. People pacemaker data. Want to know whether the device that did to Nancy's Wi-Fi network has been identified. They want to know whether the fingerprint truly matches someone already questioned in the case. But so far, authorities have remained largely silent. No public confirmations, no denials, just a steady investigation continuing behind closed doors. And that silence has only fueled even more speculation. Because in the world of modern investigations, when information disappears into a black hole, the internet tends to fill that gap with its own theories. Some believe investigators are building a much larger case before making an arrest. Others think authorities may already know exactly who is responsible and are simply waiting for one final piece of evidence. There are even theories suggesting the suspect may not realize how much information has already been uncovered. The pacemaker data, the Wi-Fi connection logs, and the fingerprint evidence are slowly closing in on someone who believes they got away with it. Whether any of those theories are true remains unclear. But one thing is certain. This case is no longer being treated as a simple disappearance. The timeline uncovered through Nancy's pacemaker has changed everything. Those final 41 minutes are now the center of the entire investigation, because they reveal a sequence that investigators cannot ignore. A sudden shock response, a mysterious device connecting to the home network, a surveillance camera shutting down seconds later, and then silence. 41 minutes of unknown activity. 41 minutes that may contain the answer to what really happened inside that house. Investigators believe the truth about that window of time may eventually expose the person responsible. And if the emerging evidence is pointing in the direction many insiders suspect, then the resolution of this case could send shockwaves through the quiet community of Catalina foothills. Because the most disturbing possibility of all is still hanging over the investigation. The possibility that the person behind Nancy Guthrie's disappearance didn't come from outside that neighborhood. They may have already been part of it. Someone who knew the streets. Someone who knew the routines. Someone who may have stood in that house before without raising suspicion. And if that theory proves correct, then the mystery surrounding Nancy's final moments may soon transform into something far more explosive. Because once investigators connect every piece of the timeline, the pacemaker spike, the digital footprint, the fingerprint, and the silent security camera, the truth could reveal not just what happened inside that house, but exactly who was standing there when it did. The mystery surrounding Nancy Guthrie is far from over, and what investigators might reveal next could completely change how everyone sees this case. Because every new detail that surfaces only raises more disturbing questions. Who was the unknown person inside the house during those missing 41 minutes? Why did a mysterious device suddenly connect to the home network? And most chilling of all, why did Nancy's pacemaker record that sudden spike of shock right before everything went silent? These are the questions that continue haunting the quiet community of Catalina foothills. But here's the part that makes this case even more unsettling. Investigators from the Federal Bureau of Investigation are reportedly still reviewing evidence that has not yet been released to the public. Digital logs, surveillance timelines, and forensic traces that could finally identify the person who is inside that house. And if the rumors circulating online are even partially true, the biggest revelation may still be coming. Because some investigators believe the person responsible didn't break into Nancy's life. They may have already been part of it. Someone familiar, someone trusted, someone who never expected the technology inside that home to record the moment everything changed. That possibility is exactly why this case continues to explode across social media. People aren't just watching the investigation anymore. They're trying to solve it. So now we want to hear from you. What do you think really happened during those 41 minutes? Was this a carefully planned crime? A betrayal from someone Nancy knew? Or is there a much darker secret that investigators haven't revealed yet? Drop your theory in the comments, share this news with someone who loves true crime, and stay tuned, because the next update about the disappearance of Nancy Guthrie might expose a truth no one is ready for.